A special program in living color on NBC.
This is the electric chair at the State Penitentiary in Lincoln, Nebraska. It has not been used since 1959. Unless the United States Supreme Court rules otherwise, it will never be used again. 14 years ago, I stood here as an official witness and watched the last person die in that electric chair. He was Charles Starkweather, a 19-year-old mass murderer who had killed 11 people. The series of murders terrorized Nebraska and shocked the rest of the nation. It was not a pleasant experience witnessing Starkweather's execution, but it was brief and decisive. That left the problem of Caril Fugate. She was a 14-year-old girl who was with Starkweather when the murders were committed. Her mother, her stepfather, and baby sister were among his victims. Caril Fugate claimed that she was Starkweather's hostage. Her jury was convinced that she was Starkweather's accomplice. Caril Fugate was sentenced to life in prison.
I've always looked to just, next year, or maybe next year, or maybe next year, or next year, or next year, until finally all these years have tracked off by themselves. But I've never, stood in the mirror and, looked and said, my goodness, girl, life. Because I think probably, personally, if I had really said in my mind, this is it, you are forever and ever and ever doomed, to a penitentiary, I don't think I would have made it. I really don't.
Caril Fugate is now 29 years old. She was sent to prison at the age of 15, the youngest woman in the United States ever to be sentenced to life imprisonment. This is the story of what has happened to her.
NBC News presents Growing Up in Prison, reported by Floyd Calvert.
Bennett, Nebraska is a town of 490 people, 18 miles from Lincoln, the state capital. It was the home of 3 of Starkweather's murder victims. Caril Fugate was tried for first-degree murder in the death of 17-year-old Robert Jensen. His father still owns and operates the town's general store. Robert Jensen's mother is a semi-invalid and leads a secluded existence. Inside her home are several pictures of her son and the girl who was killed with him, 16-year-old Carol King, the girl he planned to marry.
It doesn't seem like it has been one day rather than 14 years. They're as real to me and as much a part of my life in a way. And of course it has made our way of life different. Like you say, I'm rather a recluse. I hate being out among crowds and people wanting to talk to me about it and be kind will come up to me and say, I hate to bring up the subject, but... Well, I know very well what they're going to say, so I'll say the subject is never off of my mind. You're not bringing up anything.
You read about these things, and so many things now are just statistics. That's all there are to the people anymore. And until it happens within a small community or within a family, why, it's just another news story.
Well, it isn't, I gather.
No, not when it comes home, it isn't.
You just have to take each day as it comes and learn to live with it. But you don't forget, not even a little bit.
It's something that will always be with me. It's something that I'll always carry with me. And I've learned to accept it, and it lives in the back of my mind. It's behind a little door. And right now, the past is over with. There's nothing I can do. I can't change it. And I have to make now, today, tomorrow, and my future. There's no way to go back. And if there was any way, humanly possible, that I could go back and I could change what happened, if I could in any way bring back those people, give them back their life that he took, if there was anything I could do, I would, but there's nothing I can do. It's over with.
January 27th, 1958. Lincoln police, alerted by suspicious relatives, searched the deserted home of Marion Bartlett, Caril Fugate's stepfather. The police found 3 bodies hidden in outbuildings behind the house. Bartlett had been shot to death. So had his wife, Caril's mother. Caril's 3-year-old half-sister had been beaten and stabbed. The next afternoon, near the town of Bennett, the bodies of Caril King and Robert Jensen were discovered at the bottom of an abandoned storm cellar. The teenaged couple, missing overnight, had been shot to death. An hour earlier, and less than 2 miles away, police had checked a farm where Starkweather used to hunt. They found the body of the owner, 70-year-old August Meyer, a friend of the Starkweather family. He had been killed with a shotgun. Local citizens formed a posse and joined the manhunt. So did the FBI, on the presumption that the killer had headed west and crossed a state line. But Starkweather had doubled back to Lincoln in Robert Jensen's car. The stolen car was found in the garage of a prominent Lincoln industrialist, C. Lauer Ward. Inside the house, police found the bodies of Ward, his wife, and the family maid. Starkweather was keeping 24 hours ahead of the police by simply killing all witnesses.
Well, since discovering the last 3 bodies, which makes a total of 9 that we know of so far, Mayor Martin and I have made an appeal for all adjoining counties, including Omaha, to send all available help they can to Lincoln. It is our opinion that the car is still in this vicinity. We know he has been for the last 3 days, and we want to cover Lincoln block to block.
Panic spread throughout the state. No one knew where the mass murderer would strike next. Citizens armed themselves and barricaded their homes. Governor Victor Anderson called out the Nebraska National Guard, but Starkweather was headed for Wyoming. That was where he was caught, 600 miles to the northwest near Douglas, Wyoming, shortly after he killed his last victim, a 37-year-old salesman named Merle Collison, who had stopped along the highway to take a nap. Once in custody, Starkweather confessed to killing 11 people. Police had never connected him to the robbery and murder of a Lincoln gas station attendant 1 month before. At first, he said Caril Fugate had no part in the killings. Later, in a series of conflicting statements, he implicated her in at least 2 of the murders.
You know, people say, well, why did she go? I was forced to go. And I begged him for a lie detector test. I begged him for truth serum. I begged him for anything that would show him that I was telling the truth. And when I went with him, my family was not there in the house. He had already killed him, and they had been put in different places there on our property. And the day I went, he threatened me that if I didn't go with him, that my family would be killed. And this was the impending thing that made me go, the force that my family would be killed. And I did not know, God is my witness, I did not know my family had already been killed. I didn't know this until I came back to Nebraska.
Nebraska authorities did not believe Caril Fugate's story. The 14-year-old girl waived extradition and was driven back to Lincoln to face charges of first-degree murder. 6 days after her arrest, the court finally appointed a lawyer to defend her.
You know, sometimes I wondered why I was the one that only survived. And I don't, it's just something inside of you. It's really hard, it's really hard to put in words. But I used to wonder, why me? You know, why was I the only one? And there was these people that he killed. They were good people. And I think they had a lot to offer the world. And I get very emotional when I talk about it because I feel so, you know, so deeply about it because, and if there was any way at all, you know, that I could bring these people back. And I'm deeply sorry that it happened. There was really no way that I could really stop it. He was a madman. And you know, the thing of it is that people don't really realize that I lost my family too.
Growing Up in Prison will continue after this message.
The Bureau. Very often that you're...
Trial, Caril Fugate spent 9 months at the State Mental Hospital in Lincoln, Nebraska. The hospital was the only place deemed appropriate in 1958 to hold a juvenile facing a charge of first-degree murder. 2 days before her trial, she left the maximum security section of the mental hospital to be interviewed. It was her attorney's attempt to combat adverse public opinion. The only reporter allowed to question her directly was Ninette Beaver of station KMTV Omaha, which had been covering the story for NBC News. Robert Jensen's mother watched the interview on television.
The thing that struck me most about her then and still was her very, very cold eyes, unfeeling look that she would have.
Why do you think he would even implicate you in that if you didn't have anything at all to do with it? Why do you think he'd want to implicate you?
Well, by now I'm sure he hates me for running away. He's trying to make it look like I'm just guilty and fear.
Had you gone with him for quite a while?
Yes, I'd went with him a year before, and then I told him I didn't want to see him again, but he came back. And after that Sunday, I went with him, and then I kept telling him to leave. And that Sunday, I told him to leave, and I told him I didn't ever want to see him again.
What had brought you to this conclusion? Why didn't you want to go with him anymore?
I think he's crazy.
Do you still think that?
Yes, I do.
Have you thought much about the outcome of the trial?
Yes.
For instance, have you thought that if you were convicted, that you might go to prison, or you might even go to the electric chair? Have you thought much about that?
Yes, I have, and I don't really believe that I have anything to worry about that, because the Lord knows that I'm innocent, and I know it. And the people who are involved in it knows it.
Did you ever break down and cry and beg Charlie to let you go or anything like that?
Yes, I cried all the way.
And he just wouldn't let you out of the car at all?
Well, I haven't seen her since the trial, but at that time I thought she was the most defiant person I'd ever seen. I think just her attitude and things, I don't think that she would have stopped right then if she could have got away. I think she wasn't bothered. I didn't see any remorse or any such thing like that.
During my whole trial, I was not totally aware of what was going on. Oh, I was in sort of a semi-daze.
Caril Fugate was convicted of first-degree murder in the robbery slaying of Robert Jensen. By law, her jury of 7 men and 5 women also had to determine her sentence. A few days before he was impaneled, one juror, H.A. Walenta, casually remarked to a friend, I'll bet you $1 she gets the chair.
Both attorneys had asked me if I'd formed an opinion and had expressed it. And I told them I had. In fact, one of them, I don't remember which one, whether it was the prosecutor or the defense, but one of them, I said I thought she'd ought to sit in Charlie's lap and save the double expense, because he'd already been convicted. But then they asked you if facts were given to you to prove you're wrong, if you could change your mind. You'd be an idiot if somebody asked proved you wrong and you wouldn't admit it.
Charles Starkweather left death row to testify against his former girlfriend, but his dramatic appearance in handcuffs and leg irons did not impress the jury. They were convinced by the state's argument that Caril had accompanied Starkweather willingly. They rejected the death penalty because of her age. In Nebraska, the minimum sentence for first-degree murder is life in prison.
We realized that a person that young could be misled, easily misled. And I think that had probably had a lot to do with our thinking and the verdict that we gave her. I know I've got some grandchildren that are about that same age now, and I'd hate to think what would happen to them. Somebody, an older person, could get them doing some of the darndest things, too.
But you still had to bring in a conviction.
Well, that's true. That's right. But, she was guilty. They didn't ask us why.
The 4-week trial was over. A few moments before, Judge Harry Spencer had asked Caril Fugate, "Is there any reason why sentence should not be pronounced at this time?" "Yes," she replied, "I'm not guilty." The judge said, "You are sentenced to imprisonment at the State Reformatory for Women at York for the period of your natural life, and you are ordered to pay the costs of the prosecution." It was the first time in the United States that a girl so young had been sentenced to life in prison. Caril Fugate was 15 years old. By law, she could not enter the general prison population until she was 16. So she spent the first 8 months at the Women's Reformatory in solitary confinement.
There was days when I would just, cry out of loneliness, for another human being. Or I used to sit by my window, because my window looked out onto to our gate, and I used to think, they're going to come and they're going to find out. They know that I didn't. And I'd wait and I'd wait and I'd watch out the window, and every time a car would come in, I'd just kind of hold my breath, And I used to just sit and just, look out and, cry and everything. And then this, I think when it really dawned on me that I knew I wasn't leaving, that it was going to be permanent, was the day that I was fingerprinted. And they fingerprint you, and then they take your what they call prison term mugshot. And I think after this, I really felt, that, this is it. I mean, you're not leaving. You're going to stay here. And I think maybe this is when I sort of started to adjust to the idea that I would be here, And that day I cried a lot.
Charles Starkweather walked into this execution chamber at midnight, June 25th, 1959. He did not seem the least bit interested in who was here. He did not display one shred of fear or remorse. Caril Fugate, who had started to serve her life sentence, appealed to President Eisenhower to spare Starkweather's life. In a telegram, she said that he might eventually tell the truth and exonerate her. Starkweather was strapped into the electric chair. Prison officials asked him if there was anything he wanted to say. He shook his head and remained silent. Then they drew this curtain. In a few moments, it was all over. Caril Fugate was now the only person alive who knew what had really happened.
it's just tragic. The whole thing's tragic. And it's been very lonely. It's hard to grow up without a mother. It's hard to grow up without a father. And it's really hard to even try to keep, contact with a family relationship. It's terribly hard for my sister to come and visit me. Maybe she's able to make it out once a year. But other than this, I have no much visiting. In the area of writing, I get very, very few letters. And there again, it's been lonely. There's no doubt about it. And it's been hard. And, when you see girls with their family comes to visit them, their mother and their father, and you think, gee, I wished I had a family to visit me. And you're happy for them. And a lot of times, when girls have problems with their family and things like this, I think, how lucky they are. Maybe they do have a fight. Maybe they do have family problems. But at least they have a family. And it makes a difference. It makes a difference when you know you have people who love you and care about you. And I really wish that there was something I could do. I wish there was a magic word I could say, or a magic phrase, or something that would, that could bring these people back. I'm sorry. I'm deeply sorry it happened. And I swear to Almighty God, I never killed any of them. And I only went because I had no choice.
Not an inmate, not a guard, who was here when she arrived. When Caril arrived at York, inmates were allowed to go to school for 45 minutes 3 times a week. It took her 10 years to finish the 8th grade and complete her high school education. She was tutored by the reformatory's only teacher. According to Caril, Mrs. Ora Sidoris gave her more than an education. She showed her how to become a lady.
It didn't take me long to notice some of the girls came from good homes, as I think you'll find today they do. They didn't need some of the things that Caril did. And I tried always to speak quietly to Caril. I never used any words that were not good. And some way or other, I just tried to instill into her a quieter voice, a nicer walk, and things that I thought would help her, because I had no idea that Caril would be with us as long as she was.
She had to maintain a very precarious balance. She had to walk a tightrope. She could not identify with the inmates overmuch, or she would become an inmate in spirit, in feeling, in personality, in outlook. She had to be aloof from the management, or she would incur the enmity of the inmates. So her position did become unique.
Shortly after Caril Fugate arrived in 1958, her attorneys produced sworn affidavits from staff members and former inmates, charging that conditions were dehumanizing and harsh. They claimed that inmates were forced to work an 8-hour day in total silence, that they were forbidden even to smile. They were not allowed to lie on their beds during the daylight hours, that if they became ill, they had to lie on the concrete floor until nightfall. Those who broke the rules were placed in solitary confinement, sometimes for weeks at a time, with only a diet of tea and toast. There were other allegations, all of them driving home the point that the prison was there just for punishment. Caril Fugate's notoriety, her ability to capture the headlines, made all of this front-page news in Nebraska, and in less than 2 weeks, the warden resigned. The reformatory began to change, and it evolved into what it is today. The inmates at the women's reformatory are no longer isolated from the outside world. They have radios, television sets, newspapers, and magazines. There are no prison uniforms. Women wear their own clothes, and they are encouraged to develop their individual personalities. Each woman has her own room. Classes are mandatory for women below the age of 25 who have not completed high school. This fall, they will be offered college courses. There are usually only about 60 women in custody here at any one time. The reformatory's rules are strict, but the atmosphere is generally relaxed. Today, the reformatory is run by 36-year-old Jackie Crawford, who is the youngest warden in the United States. She uses solitary confinement sparingly when nothing else works, but she considers it therapy, not punishment.
You know, there's a certain therapeutic value to lock up, and after that's gone, you know, pull them. You have to. And we have seen women grow, really grow. It's a traumatic experience to have that door slam and someone say, all right, that's your decision. When you can straighten up, then we will talk to you. And just leave you. Just nobody. And you begin to evaluate, you begin to think. And this is what they have done down here, is actually straightened out their thinking.
And they come to you then and they say, I'm sorry and I'm ready to go out. Do you buy that?
No, I don't buy it. Number one, they're going to promise you anything to get out. And we won't be helping them in the long run if we let them out when they want out, if we feel they're not ready. What we're trying to do is to help a woman as far as her self-worth, to gain it so that we can possibly help her become a more useful citizen as far as going home, becoming a mother, possibly a good wife. I think this is really important. And in order for us to do this, we have to work with her individually and regroup some of the thought patterns.
One time, I had, started to feel that, it's just too hard to do. It's just too hard to do. I'm not going to make it, And it started to show. My face started to show. My hair started to show. It just started to show that I was going through a difficult period when I thought, what is the use? I'm just not going to make it. And Mrs. Crawford, the superintendent, she said, come here, Carol. She said, I want to show you something. And she took me by the hand and she went in and she said, look in the mirror. And I looked in the mirror and I cried because I looked like I was just going downhill. This is what I mean. If she didn't care, she could have said, fine, just look the way you do, go on down here, I don't care. But she didn't. She cared enough to show me what I needed to do. And this is the type of caring I mean. She got right in and said, look at yourself. Take a look at yourself. And it had a tremendous impact. And the next day I went up and I got my hair cut, and I fixed myself up and I really looked, I looked better, I felt better. And she gave me something to make me go on. She gave me something again. She gave me back my dignity. She gave me back my personal appearance. She gave me back something that probably had she not noticed and had she not cared, I probably would have just continued to maybe regress a little more instead of progressing.
So many times I have heard people say, they're just like we are. Well, of course they're just like we are. I mean, they breathe, they sleep, they cry, they feel. Possibly they've made a mistake. Okay. We've made a few, maybe not as serious, but they're just like we are. There just really isn't that much difference. And I think that this is something so many times that we have forgotten, that because those people have been placed in a detention area or a penitentiary of some type, that they're not like we are. Well, before they were placed there, we thought they were, until they were caught, tried, and convicted. And I mean, this is just the way I feel, that too many times we have forgotten that these people are human beings.
The county courthouse in York, Nebraska is just a few minutes' drive from the reformatory. Many of the reformatory's staff grew up in this prosperous rural community where everyone knows everyone else. In recent years, a special relationship has developed between the small town and the small prison. Some of the women from the reformatory are allowed to visit York under supervision, to go to the movies, to attend church services, and to shop in the stores. The 7,000 people who live in York take a keen interest in their neighbors. That is one reason why the reformatory inmates are no longer strangers. Last year, the York Chamber of Commerce, working with reformatory officials, helped establish a work release program. Women who have earned trustee status now work regular shifts in several businesses around town, and they are paid regular wages. Mr. and Mrs. Ed Schroeder hired the first inmate. They now employ 3 women from the reformatory as chambermaids at their motel.
We were first contacted. Our first feeling was, gosh, prison inmates out here? Why, nothing would be safe, We had never had any contact with inmates of any kind before.
I was real skeptical. Actually, I knew nothing about prisons at all. All I knew was what we saw, and this was striped uniforms and walls, really.
Our experience and attitude has just changed entirely toward these girls. It's real difficult to comprehend that they ever did anything wrong, because they're just real ladies out here. They work, and they're pleasant to have around. We've had no problems as far as the girls taking anything out of the guests' rooms or anything like that. It's just been a real nice relationship.
If these girls have no association with the outside world for the length of time that a lot of them have to be in there, I don't think it's even fair to expect these girls to go out and try to make it on their own. It just isn't possible.
There are a few recreational facilities at the reformatory, so women who earn the privilege are allowed to go bowling in town. Caril Fugate had never been to a bowling alley before her imprisonment. She has pushed her average to 103. The town opens its indoor swimming pool for the inmates 2 mornings each week.
The community of York has really been very generous and very kind to the women out here. They could have just said, no, we don't want any of the women from out there on the hill, to come down to our swimming pool. And I know that I probably would have never learned to swim, if the community of York hadn't gave me the opportunity to use their pool and also to volunteer their lifeguards. Maybe I can't just, walk the streets free or something, but they're willing to at least, let me come down for a small part of a time and be part of their community.
Growing up in prison.
For a long time, I went through a period of wishing that I was someone else. I was great at beating myself. I was great at being down on myself more than what anybody was down on me. I used to think that I didn't have the right to do a lot of things, or even to feel a lot of things. And through counseling, and it was with a minister, I found out two things. One, that I am Caril Fugate, and it doesn't leave a bitter taste in my mouth. For years, it used to, I would get real upset if people said my last name, because it was like, somebody throwing mud, and it hurt. It was another little way of, digging. And the other one, I found out that I'm a child of God, and that no matter what happens, no matter what happened, in the sight of God, it's over. And I think these two things, side by side, have helped me come a long way.
Caril Fugate was baptized a Roman Catholic 2 years ago. On Sunday, she works as a volunteer at the local Church of the Nazarene.
Well, to tell the truth, the first 2 Sundays, I didn't even know who she was. And then finally, I didn't see any man with her, and I thought, well, she's single. And then I realized that our minister had been going out to the reformatory for Bible classes. And then I thought, possibly that could be someone from there. And then I heard the name Caril, and I was dumbfounded, because we lived here at the time that the things happened that she was put in there for. And I remember barring my door at that time, and I was scared to death because my children, older children, were young then. And I had to kind of think about this. And I went home and discussed it with my husband. And then I thought, we all need a chance to prove ourselves. And I could put myself in her place very easily and say, well, my life would really be over if no one would trust me again. I've worked with Caril in the nursery, and I really have enjoyed her as a person. And I believe really we as Christian people, if we truly believe in the Bible, will live it. And in the Bible it says that we should reach out a helping hand to those who need it. And I truly believe that those out at the Women's Reformatory do need our help, not just Caril, but she has become a personal friend of mine. And when she comes up before the parole board, I really do plan on bringing a carload of the people in our church that will come down and stand up and count for her, that we truly believe that she should be given a chance, because I believe the inner heart can change.
Now she's putting her 30 in. It's time to give her a chance to prove herself. She can't prove herself in there. She'll always do just like she is here. She's got to go out in society and be back among society people before she can really prove to the people that she is what she professes to be.
We don't believe, for example, as some people do, that when a crime is committed against a society, that you just take a person and punish them forever by putting them in jail. Our policies and programs are directed at reforming that individual. And from the advanced information that I have had on Caril Fugate, and I have followed it with keen interest, I believe that if there is never an example of how our system has worked, it's best exemplified in what has been done to rehabilitate Caril Fugate. And I feel quite sure that sometime in the future, possibly the immediate future, we can put Caril Fugate back into society, where we think that she will have an excellent opportunity to become a valuable working member of our Nebraska community.
I think this is a very...
Caril Fugate plans to leave Nebraska if she is released, but she has become a part of the community. She speaks to civic groups and service clubs throughout the state without revealing her identity. But this day, everyone knew who she was.
Our philosophy is to deal with the total woman. Our program does not deal with why she is there, but what she does while she is there. When she comes into the institution, she has nothing. She hates herself, she hates society, and she wishes she was anywhere but in an institution. Step by step, she progresses through the institution. The more privileges she can assume, the more responsibility she assumes with them. If for any reason a woman cannot handle any of the privileges given her, they can be taken away, and she must then begin again to earn them back. In order for total rehabilitation to be successful, the community as a society in general must become involved. It is from the community that the inmate comes, and is back to the community the inmate returns. There is no way the two can be separated and expect a total, complete rehabilitation of the offender. It is not my intention to convince anyone that every prisoner can be corrected in the community. I don't believe that. There is a small percentage of the prisoners in every penal institution who are dangerous. Officials estimate, say, about 15%. They are dangerous to themselves and to everyone around them, inside or outside, and would function best in a mental institution rather than in a penitentiary. If penologists believe, and they say they do, that 85% of the prisoners are receptive to corrective treatment, then I wonder why salvageable men and women are kept behind bars. Are they kept there to be taught to live in prison?
This girl has been incarcerated for about 15 years now. And it's the objective of corrections to prepare people for release to the community. We'd like to bring these people to a point in time where they accept the responsibility for their own behavior. And when we've accomplished this, it would seem to me this is the time to consider release.
Caril Fugate has now spent almost half of her life in prison. She continues to protest her innocence. Her hopes for freedom and vindication now rest with the United States Supreme Court, which will decide whether to consider her appeal for a new trial. That decision may come this fall. If the Supreme Court decides not to hear her case, Caril Fugate says she will ask for the first time for a parole. So this is where her future may be decided. In a small room just a few feet away from one of the main cell blocks in the Nebraska State Penitentiary. The three men who make up the State Parole Board in Nebraska will not concern themselves with a question of guilt or innocence. They will carefully go over her prison record. They will hear the arguments both for and against her release, and then they will decide if she's ready to be returned to society. We do not know what the State Parole Board will decide. The most it can do is give Caril Fugate her freedom. No one can change what happened.
Well, I definitely am opposed to her release at any time. I think that about sums it up. All right, now you've paid a few years, and we'll just forget about it all. It was in the past. But you can't forget about it. As I said, Bob and Carol are as real to me as if it had happened last night or yesterday. I don't think that she has paid for what she did. I don't think she can ever pay for what she did. And I think it would be I don't quite know how to word it, a miscarriage of justice for the ones that were taken, for her to be released to have a good life from now on. Their life was taken from them right at the very prime.
Well, in the first place, I don't think there was any doubt about her guilt, and I don't think there was any doubt about her ability to realize right and wrong. In fact, I think probably she was the instigator of most of this. But she's had a trial, and a fair trial, I think. And as far as she paying, or anyone paying for taking another person's life, I don't think they can do that. But we have laws, and that's what they're for, to be applied to things like this. And if she's coming up for parole, I'm sure we have qualified people to pass on that. It's hard to not say things that you... But I know that you can be destroyed by hate and bitterness just by... as well as faith and love can be your salvation, so... I don't know how much influence so-called public pressure will have with the parole board, but I don't think it should have any. They should be qualified people, and they should look at it in that way.
In other words, you would not do anything yourself to prevent her release if they think she's ready to come out, is that?
No, I wouldn't. Another year, another 5 years, another 10 years, she still couldn't pay for that. But if the purpose of it is for rehabilitation, well, half of her lifetime ought to be enough to rehabilitate her.
I don't know how a father can arrive at this point. I mean, where do you get...
Well, I'll tell you what, if that's what my son would have said. Forgive them. They didn't know what they were doing. He would have, too. And that's what I've thought for some time now.
That just about says it all, doesn't it?
It does, as far as I'm concerned.
Hi, this is Boots Randolph. When a team like Doc Severinsen